And we are back with another episode of the Hockey Princess podcast. I am your host, the Hockey Princess. Guys, it's just me. Krusty's not here. He's soaking up sun and ignoring the Seth Jones haters. But he did want to pass along the message while he's out on a boat right now that he did watch the Calgary game and he is not impressed with Seth Jones's performance and is loving him just slightly less. Still loves him, but is very disappointed with his playing during the Calgary game this week. He just wanted to pass along that message while he was on a boat soaking up some sun. Just as a reminder, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Music, however you watch or listen to us ramble on a weekly basis. If you are going to a game this season, be it NHL, AHL, ECHL, juniors, please wait for the whistle. Do not get up all the pucks in play. The food will still be there, the bathrooms will still be there, and the beer will still be there. I promise you. And please do not try to get back to your seat while the game is in play. Please just wait. And if you are going to a Blackhawk game this year and you hear a girl saying, move, or down in front, and you happen to be in section 330, it's me. I've gotten chirpier as the season goes on regarding please waiting for the whistle. Let's get into it, guys, because like I said, and as you've noticed, that it's just me. So this is going to be a little bit shorter because we don't have Crusty Old Guy giving us roadblocks and detours and speed bumps, and it's just me. So this might be a little bit shorter, but still, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Some stuff, we'll talk about some games, but we're also going to look ahead and just talk about some other things because I don't know about you, but I'm really just kind of bored on harping on all of the negative things that we're all aware of, guys. We're losing. It's bad. I think Con Bedard is secretly wishing that the San Jose Sharks have the number 1 overall pick for 2023. It's bad. Everyone is bad. So we'll talk about it a little bit, but we don't need to talk about it the entire time because harping on how bad everything is for an entire hour is really boring and kind of really depressing and just seems lazy on my end for me to be for me to only be talking about that. So we're going to talk about some other stuff too, do some predictions and some other things, look to the future. But first, let's talk about the NHL. We have a couple of injuries for injury report. We've got Heineman from the Montreal Canadiens is out for 3 to 4 weeks. He was hit by a car in Utah prior to Montreal's matchup with the Utah Hockey Club, so he will be out for a couple of weeks. Seems to be okay, but just minor injuries that are keeping him out for a little bit. John Tavares took an awkward fall during the Toronto Maple Leafs practice today. So we don't know if that was just something minor or something more serious. Unsure, hasn't been disclosed yet. You've got Kaprizov and Brock Faber for the Minnesota Wild. They practiced today for Minnesota, but neither of them were in the lineup for Minnesota's matchup with the Edmonton Oilers today. And then also from Minnesota, Jared Spurgeon didn't practice, but according to management for the Minnesota Wild, he is very much improving. Also for the NHL world, you've got Tristan Jarry, who is a goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins, was put on waivers today in a semi-dramatic fashion. I think everybody saw it coming, but it was still a little bit of a surprise. Pittsburgh's been struggling, especially in the goaltending department. Yari's been struggling. So I'm not completely surprised by this. To my knowledge, nobody has claimed him yet. So who knows? He might be going down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, which is the Pittsburgh AHL affiliate, but we're not sure yet. That is all that I have on the NHL world. For our prospects, let's get into our prospect report. Sorry, I have like 8 pages of notes and I'm just trying to find them. Yeah, perfect. Prospect report. So starting off with the guys that we typically start off with. You've got Sam Renzel with 1 goal and 1 assist, and then Oliver Moore with only 1 assist this weekend for University of Minnesota. Sasha Boisvert, you have the overtime game-winning goal for University of North Dakota this past weekend. Aiden Thompson, you've got 2 goals and 2 assists for University of Denver. You've got 2 goals and 3 assists for Ryan Green out of Boston University. Only 1 assist for Martin Misiak for Erie Otters. For Jack Pridham for Kitchener Rangers, you've got 1 goal and 2 assists. Merrick Vanaker for Brantford Bulldogs, 2 assists. And then Nick Lourdes with Brantford has 2 goals for this past weekend. And then last but certainly not least, Alex Ferrand with 5 assists this past weekend. He's definitely one that I need to watch more footage on because I'm familiar but also not familiar with him. But I'm very intrigued because I feel like he's never really talked about in terms of like prospect reports. I don't think he's the flashiest player from what I've read and what I've watched, but like I said, I do need to do a little bit more research and watch a little bit more footage on him. But he never really seems to be mentioned like, you know, your Lourdes, your Misiak, your kids that are in college right now. But he's always on the score sheet. Every weekend that we report, there's always multiple of his point. He's always scoring multiple points every weekend. Typically it's assists, which makes me think that his position is more of a playmaker and less of a goal scorer. But like Crusty likes to say, and we like to say every week, you know, we need that. We don't have a lot of that because we really don't have a lot of anything. But I'm very intrigued by Alex Ferrand, like I said, just because he's never really mentioned, but he's always there. He's always on the score sheet, and he seems to just be very consistent with his performance and with his point scoring. Jumping over to Rockford. We'll talk about the prospects still a little bit because we're going to do some little predictions. But Rockford, 2 losses and 1 win. For the win was against Milwaukee. Sorry, once again, trying to find my notes. Kamesa was in net with his 2nd shutout of the year and of his career. Paul Ledwinski and Levshinov were scratched. Everybody was a little confused. And like, why? Because they were skating for warm-ups and then they were scratched. People were wondering, are they getting called up? Were they banged up? There was rumors that like a stomach bug was going around. But they were in the rumors even grew because before we understood why they were scratched, then you look up on the AHL transactional sheet and 3 guys from Indy were called up. And we're like, oh gosh, are they getting sent down to the ECHL? Are they getting called up to the big league? Is something going on? Did they get injured and nobody's reported it yet? What is happening? And it turns out they just got scratched because they missed team meeting. So that was it. So they weren't there for the Rockford versus Milwaukee game. Solid momentum. It also looked like Milwaukee had absolutely no gas whatsoever. Also, with the scratchings, you had Savoie on the top line, which, you know, you love to see. I certainly love to see. Jalen Lightbin with also a very, very great game. Been very impressed with his performance and his consistency ever since he was recalled from the Indy Fuel. For those who have not been following this year, he was up in Rockford for a little bit, got sent back down to Indy, made that incredible Sabrina Carpenter video that's on the Indy Fuel TikTok. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's definitely one of the funniest things that I've watched. And then he came back up to Rockford. And ever since he came back up to Rockford, he's definitely been very consistent. And I really like his performance. And I also really like how he's been able to gel with the other younger guys like Ledwinski, Savoie on like the 3rd and 4th line, because typically Lightbin's a bottom 6 centerman, but he's been gelling very well and adding a lot more personality to the already very heightened personality that are the younger kids that are playing bottom 6 minutes. So yeah, it was a solid game. Bigger concerns with Rockford is, you have one loss that you lose 1-4, then you lose 1-6, and then you win 5-0. It seems very hot and cold just across the board in terms of we're either able to score a ton or we're able to score nothing at all. We're either incredible defensively or our defensemen rarely ever show up. Goaltending, you're either playing lights out or you're getting lit up like a Christmas tree. There's no middle with performance that I've seen from Rockford this year. And that seems to be my biggest concern, is that, now we're getting into January and we're still seeing this pattern that we've been kind of seeing since the beginning of the season. And not only has it not been corrected, but it doesn't even seem like it's something that's being addressed. So that's one of my biggest concerns with Rockford and their position right now. And especially when we're getting lit up like a Christmas tree, the defensemen really aren't present. We're unable to, get even into the offensive zone, let alone struggling to score. There's a lot of poor habits, and there are a lot of poor habits that are being either shown by the veterans or even learned by the young kids, or probably hand in hand together, which is also a concern because you're seeing that from the big club kind of trickle down to Rockford, which is something that it really scares me. The amount of similarities in terms of performance from the NHL and the AHL level, especially with just like not there's the lack of discipline at both levels. And it concerns me because, as people like to say that are very much on the KD rebuilding train, like, we have all of these prospects coming, it's going to be fine, it doesn't matter what we do this year. Yes, we have prospects coming, but also, first of all, we don't know how they're going to be. We don't know. Even KD doesn't know. Nobody knows anything, as we like to say on the show a lot. Yes, there's bright spots coming, but if all Rockford is doing is just learning that losing is okay and building these poor habits, then what's the point of the rebuild? Then essentially we're just crafting to become the next Buffalo or next Ottawa or next Anaheim or next San Jose, where a rebuild isn't taking 5 to 7 years. It's taking significantly longer. So that's a concern that I have. As of right now, who knows? Maybe it'll change. I hope it changed, but this is just what I'm seeing right now, is just, there's a lot of poor decision making and bad habits you're seeing at the NHL level, and the lack of discipline and the lack of effort. But there's the occasional games, you're able to beat Florida, you're able to beat Colorado sometimes, but most of the time you're just nailing in the game. And you're starting to see it a little bit come down to Rockford. And that's my biggest concern right now. Also with Rockford, we have a trade that happened today. Isaac Phillips was traded for Dmitry Kuzmin from the Winnipeg Jets. It was essentially a young defenseman for a young defenseman. A lot of people think, like, because Dmitry Kuzmin, yes, he's played with Artie before. Yes, he's played with Gavin Hayes before, that they traded him for that reason. I do think that helps. However, I think Isaac Phillips, Philip Kurashev, and Lucas Reichel fall into the category of management doesn't know what to do. They don't know where to put them. They don't know where they fit right now in the rebuild. And yes, I know Kurashev's performance has been significantly lacking lately, and that's definitely a main contributor. But I think even before his performance started tanking, management didn't know what to do with him. Kyle didn't know what to do with him. Luke didn't know what to do with him. He was kind of just there. And same with Lucas Reichel, and same with Isaac Phillips. They're all drafted right around that same time frame. And it was kind of COVID slash, you're like one of the last pieces that was drafted by old management. I don't know what they wanted to do. I don't think that they had an idea of what to do or how they fit in the rebuild, the KD rebuild era. So I don't necessarily think this trade was specifically trying to trade for Kuzman. I think it was trying to give Isaac Phillips the opportunity to play for a team where he may have more potential than here, because he really wasn't going to get any playing here. He was just going to kind of consistently sit in Rockford, maybe get an occasional minute up at the big club. Maybe. Again, we don't know. Probably not, especially with all of the younger kids that are coming up through the ranks defensively. Who knows if he would have gotten an actual opportune shot back up at the big club, or if he was just going to, play bottom 3 minutes in Rockford until his contract was up. But some facts about Kuzman. He's from Winnipeg, 21, defenseman. Like I said, he's played with Artie. He's played with Gavin Hayes before. He's a left-handed defenseman, so ideally I would assume, especially for the first couple of games, to add to the fluff of these two Belarusian younger defensemen. I'd imagine Rockford's next game they put Kuzman and Levchinov together. Whether they stay together for the entire game or long term, I don't know yet, because I haven't watched a ton of Kuzman's game. I just learned about him today. So we'll see how that kind of pans out. But I would imagine, at least for the beginning of the game, it's Kuzman and Levchinov together. I imagine he's been kind of afloat between the AHL and the ECHL within Winnipeg's system. I imagine that's how he stays. I'm definitely okay with this. He has one more year on his contract before he becomes a restricted free agent. I'd imagine, they keep him, maybe even extend him, who knows. But there's quite a few defensive guys down in Rockford that I don't think come back next year, and maybe he just fills one of their spots as more of a leader. I don't know. Well, I definitely think he'll at least be here next year, but long term, I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Now we're going to get into some predictions in terms of the next couple of years. Because, like I said, guys, it's really depressing right now at the big kid level. So I don't want to spend an hour just talking about how bad everybody's performance is. It's depressing, it's boring, and it's really lazy on my end if that's the only thing that I'm bringing to you. So what I'm going to do is we're kind of just going to break down goaltenders versus defensemen versus forwards in terms of who do we think is going, who do we think is staying, and what the next couple of years look like. Because that sounds way more fun for me to talk about than the Dead Wing game from this past week. But we will talk about it a little bit, but just not a ton. So for goaltending, you have Peter Mrazek. We still have Laurent Brissot, or however you pronounce the Frenchman's name, that has been sitting on injured reserve with multiple different ailments this season. Both of them their contract ends in 2026, so they have one more year, and then both of them become unrestricted free agents. Bloom, I believe, is up at the end of this year, and he is a restricted free agent, and he's eligible for arbitration. I imagine that Kyle does look to re-sign him, because if the plan is to let Mrazek and or Brissot go at the end of their contract, you're still going to need a veteran. And I think it's going to be more of I don't know if Mrazek or Brissot want to sign for as short term as Kyle would give them. So they'll probably test free agency, I would imagine. But Bloom, I imagine they re-sign because Kyle is cheap. I imagine Bloom goes to arbitration, and it's sort of a Philip Kurashev situation. Mitch Weeks, who has been one of the goaltenders for down in Rockford with Drew Comesso. His contract ends similar to Mrazek and Brissett. It's a 2025-2026 at the end of that season, but his contract is through Rockford or through Indy. It's not an NHL contract, so it doesn't necessarily affect the Blackhawks cap. So he is in kind of a different situation. However, I imagine Katie is going to take him into consideration because he is a piece in the goaltending puzzle. And then we have Adam Guyon, who this is his first year at University of Minnesota Duluth. He's going to be there for a while, which is fine. But with Comesso, this is his second year right now in the AHL. He's about 50-50 with weeks at this point, maybe a little bit under. There's kind of a situation with him because when do you bring him up? How does Weeks fill into that? Brissett's still day to day, but he's been day to day for the past month. And they still have one more year, Brissett and Mrazek. So what I'm figuring is, say Mrazek and Brissett, which is essentially Mrazek and Bloom, both. So I assume Mrazek and Brissett both leave at 2025-2026, leaving 2 hypothetical open spots at the big club. I imagine Bloom gets 1 going into the 2026-27 season. And that is when you potentially, I think that would be the earliest that you would bring Comesso up, is 2026-2027. Because the thing is he's playing fine right now. I think he had a better season last year than he is this year. So I don't think you should rush bringing him up. I think he needs at least another year down in Rockford before he's considered bringing him up. And I'd like to see a bit more from his game because, like I said, with Rockford, it's very inconsistent right now. Either they're playing lights out, absolutely incredible, or they're getting lit up like a Christmas tree. And so ideally, I'd like to see a little bit more stability in Comesso's game and a little bit more having more comfortability in front of the net from Comesso before I bring him up more consistently than just bringing him up for injured reserve. The kid's going to get brought up if both goaltenders are out. That makes sense. But long-term wise, I'd like to see him at least finish out this year and have a little bit more into next year before bringing him up consistently. So, but going into 2026-27 is when, at least for me, is the first time that I would consider bringing Drew up. It'll be the first year of his new contract because his also ends in 25-26, like Mrazek and Brissett. At that point, he'll have had 3 years in Rockford, or maybe he's still in Rockford depending on the minor league situation because, yes, you'll have weeks because initially we didn't think Brissett was going to be out this long, and it was going to be Bloom and Comesso in Rockford, and Weeks was still going to be down in Indy. So, and Weeks has also been playing really well, is the thing. So I don't think he should immediately get the boot back down to Indy with what they're doing. I mean, he's playing well. There's no reason why he shouldn't still stay up in Rockford. But going into 26-27, you have Weeks, and then you need somebody because ideally, I don't want Adam Guyon there just yet. If I could get him to play his entire 4 years at University of Minnesota Duluth and then sign him, that would be great. Who knows? He could be playing lights out, and then they could not rush the process, but speed it up a little bit. But I don't think that's the case, and I don't want him rushed because he's ideally supposed to be our next goaltender, or at least the combo of Comesso and Guyon is the KD dream. So I really don't want him rushed in college. Let him sit in college. We have no worry. But some couple of suggestions and ideas that I had going into that season to balance out Weeks is, I feel like Kyle can go one of two ways. Well, one of three ways, really. You can bring up Ben Gaudreau, who's down in Indy, and just have him come up and fill out that year until Guyon comes in his first year after college. Be fine. It would be a little bit higher than what Gaudreau was expecting. He has been playing okay down in Indy so far. Who knows in the next couple of years? But that's an option, is to just straight up recall who's ever playing in Indy to fill that second spot behind Weeks. You can go the signing a European kid, like your Finland and your Latvia goaltender from World Juniors. You got Rimpinen from Finland and Feldberg from Latvia. Neither of them are drafted, and they did play very well. I'm not expecting them to be able to play, at the NHL level. We don't know, because we really don't know anything. But it's definitely an option. And then maybe, you can either just sign him to an AHL contract with Rockford or sign him to an NHL contract. And then once you're kind of sorted, you could always trade and flip. Or you can go the college kid route, maybe like a Matt Davis from the University of Denver, or maybe there's plenty of other goaltenders from very competitive schools that they're not signed either. Neither of them hurt. I think the only thing that would hurt them in terms of the goaltending aspect is if they rushed Guyon too quickly, because the kid's only in his freshman year. But I'd like to see either three of those options. So that's far too much talking about goaltending. Let's, defensively wise, we've got some thoughts. We've got some feelings. So we've got core. You've got in the Rockford aspect, Fitzgerald, Pietroniro. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. The guy that we got last week. EDM, Felix, Artie. King is recalled, but I imagine he goes back down to Indy when we don't meet him. And then Kuzmin, the new acquiree. Between all of them, I'd imagine Core gets called up. With the trade deadline, there's potentially, you have anywhere for up to 4 positions that could be potentially open next year, depending on how free agency and the trade deadline goes. I imagine out of the defensive guys that are down in Rockford, Core is the number one priority to get brought back up. If you have an open spot, it goes to Core. Fitzgerald, Pietroniro, and Felix, you only need one of them. You don't need all 3 of them. They're essentially all doing the same thing. And like I said, King's going back down to Indy. You also have a couple of guys in terms of prospects that maybe the time to bring them over. 2 are Tage Harding from Providence College, and he does need to be signed this summer. Otherwise, he goes to free agency. I would love to see him down in Rockford. He's a bigger guy. He's physical. I think he can easily fill that grit and physicality that you have from those veterans, like I mentioned, but he's a lot younger. So I'd like to see Tage Harding come over next year for the Rockford Ice Hawks. And also there's Sam Renzel, who's been playing incredibly this year. A lot of people would like to see him in Minnesota another year. Some people are saying bring him up to Chicago immediately. I'd like to see him a year in Rockford at least. I don't think he's necessarily ready for the immediate jump. Who knows? I could be wrong. I love when I'm wrong. But could he come over to Rockford at the end of this year? Maybe. That would be cool. Pairing-wise, these are not actual pairings. This is just logistically how I chose to write it out. Ideally, I'd like to see, you got your Tage Harding, your EDM, as much as I argue that he should be brought up at the big club. Right now, I think it's a term of spacing and not necessarily his performance that's keeping him in the AHL. And then you've got Artie and Kuzmin. And then, like I said, I would imagine that it's either going to be Felix or Fitz. And then you've got Core or Renzel, hypothetically. And then forwards, we got a lot of guys. There's a lot of forwards. A lot of guys I assume are going to be gone. Hayes, I think, stays. Senny, I'm not entirely sure. I could see him leaving, but they've also labeled him the captain. So I don't necessarily know what that locker room looks like down in Rockford. And if they want to keep him, for the leadership aspect, I would completely be on board for that. He does become a UFA this upcoming summer. So unsure. Joey's still signed for a couple of more years. Gutman's a UFA at the end of the year. I'd like to see him re-signed, but who knows? Landon, please call him up. I really hope after the trade deadline, he's the first guy that gets called up. Like I've mentioned this a couple of times, Zach Sanford, Jackson Cates, and Brandon Baddock, you don't need all three. You need one, maybe two. Again, they're all kind of playing the same-ish role. You don't need all of them there. It's time for more of the younger kids to come to Rockford, just like how this year brought some more. It's time for more. You don't need 3 AHL veterans that are doing the same job. It's just keeping spots away from the kids. Mayhew, I imagine they keep him just because he is on the score sheet a lot for Rockford. So maybe they re-sign him. Jalen Laban, he's a restricted free agent. I really hope they give him a qualifying offer because, like I said, ever since he came back from Indy, he's been playing very, very well. I don't know if it's his, going down to the ECHL gave him a bit of a confidence boost, or if he's just gelling with the new coach, because those kind of came around the same time with Mark Eaton being the new head coach and Laban coming back from Indy. So I'm unsure of what clicked for him. I just know right now it's clicking. Marcel, we don't necessarily have to worry about. He's signed on an AHL level contract. I imagine Rockford keeps him to another AHL contract, and Paul is still here for the next couple of years. A lot of this depends on the big league and their trade deadline and what Kyle decides to do. I imagine NASCAR and Doc do still stay up for the rest of this season and going into next year, because we also have a lot of forwards coming from prospects that I think, like I said, there needs to be another wave of younger kids coming to Rockford so they all can grow up together and organically grow to make Kyle Davidson's dream come true. So you've got Ryan Green, Aiden Thompson, Dominic James. I imagine Dominic James or Aiden Thompson, one of them gets signed because both of them do have to be signed at some point during the summer. They become free agents. My money is on Aiden Thompson just because he is producing a heck of a lot more than James is right now. You've got Frond, you've got Lardis, you've got Misiak. I think out of those three, I would see Frond and Lardis coming over. Realistically, probably all three of them do come over. And then there's the Oliver Moore situation where a lot of people praise his game. I'm also a big fan, very excited to see him in a month. I think he needs another year because right now I'm not seeing enough whatsoever from his game. I think he had a really good freshman year, but going into this sophomore year, I'm really not seeing it. And you know what? Another year is fine for him. I don't think it's the end of the world. Like I said, a lot of this depends on the trade deadline for Chicago. And that'll kind of tell, which kids get brought up from Rockford and therefore which prospects are kind of going to get brought over to Rockford based on spacing. So it kind of just depends. But there are 2, potentially 4 spots, I would say, with the big club in terms of if they get rid of as many guys as I would like them to get rid of. And out of the 4 spots that could be available, I would like to see Landon Slager get another call up. I don't think he played bad at the end of the year, so I don't see why not. And there's certainly nothing in his game in Rockford that concerns me. So I think right now maybe it's a bit of a spacing, especially with there's quite a few guys that you're getting rid of either at the trade deadline or during free agency that are bottom six, and I don't see the issue in slotting Landon Slager into one of those bottom six spots. Speaking of bottom six players, why not bring up Sam Savoy, at least for a couple of games, for the fun of it? You know, we don't have a lot of heart right now. No one's bringing us into the fight. So why not bring up number 67, Sam Savoy, just for the chaos? Let's see what could happen. Hockey may be fun to watch then. I wouldn't be shocked if they bring up Cole Gutman just for a little bit. That I could see if they're unsure about bringing up any of the younger kids, like in the sense of like injury, maybe somebody has to be brought up, but they don't want to bring up any of the younger kids quite yet. Or in that instance, I could see Gutman getting brought up. And Gavin Hayes is probably the last one out of the kiddos that I could see them bringing up if there's a spot open. But that really just depends. So that's a lot about Rockford, guys. This is so much fun. All right. Getting into the big club. It's been bad, guys. It's been really bad. I'm going to be really honest. I haven't watched a ton this past week. One, because I'm poor. And two, because it's really bad. We did win against Colorado last week, which was great. I did not watch because I am poor. And then we lost to Edmonton, which sucks because Corey Perry got the tying goal, which really sucks because, guys, I don't like Corey Perry. I kept telling my friend, anyone but Corey Perry, anybody but Corey Perry. And then, of course, Corey Perry scores. So I've got a couple of notes from the Chicago-Edmonton game. It was Bloom versus Picard in net. First goal, you got Tavo and then Foligno. You had the kids line out there for a little bit, which was Reichel, NASCAR, and Duck. Everybody was kind of concerned that, the kid line never really touched the puck. Sorensen kept matching up that kid line against Draisaitl's line. What do you mean they never touched? They were never going to touch the puck. Never. That's why you put Dickinson in front of Draisaitl. You don't match up Draisaitl against NASCAR. That's unfair to NASCAR. Anyway, I digress. Then Edmonton really took the momentum with the Perry goal. They kind of just had absolutely no heart until the last 2 minutes of the game, which if you're letting up 3 unanswered goals, you don't deserve to win it. You don't. The hockey game is 60 minutes, and I expect more out of everybody. Donato had a really good goal. Amazing setup by Nolan Allen. Once again, I'm glad that he's starting to get the appreciation that he deserves because he is playing very, very well. I thought Creature had a great game. He's been impressing everybody, or at least me. I joked that he was the Nikita Zadorov 2.0 for the Blackhawks. But that was just because I like to see the goalie protectiveness. It was giving me Zadorov protecting Stalock flashbacks. Bloom, I thought, still played well. I really don't think all of the goals were his fault. There were some boneheaded plays by the defenseman in front of him, and he was kind of just left on his own. I have defense question mark in my notes against the Edmonton game. And then we played Detroit, which sucked. Guys, I don't think we'll ever beat Detroit again. I think it's the Patrick Kane curse, which, as a big Patrick Kane fan, still, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. I fully believe that this man is in his reputation era. He was shit on by Chicago media and most Chicago reporters and shit on by management for a while at the end. and then was told, you gave your entire career or most of your career to one city, brought this city 3 cups. We don't want you anymore by a former coffee boy, and then was shipped off to a different team. And now you're playing for the rival. So you should beat us every time because what we did was not nice. We played Detroit. Once again, there's just absolutely no effort by anybody. There was a lot of people, picking on certain veterans. It's across the board. No one is playing well. Everyone is playing bad. No one cares anymore. And then the Calgary game, which I tried to listen to, and then every time I turned on the radio, Calgary scored. So then I was not listening to it, trying to help the team. And I know that's not how it works, but in my brain, I thought I was helping. But then they still lost. And they lost because of Seth Jones. I mean, they lost because everybody was playing bad, but in particular, they lost because of Seth Jones. I can admit it. Even Krusty's admitting it. They lost because of Seth. But I would like to have a conversation about Seth. Yes, I would like to preface with his performance since he's been coming back from injury has been pretty bad. I'm still convinced he's not 100% whatsoever, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's still injured. I very much think that he was rushed back to play for the Winter Classic, and he hasn't played the same since prior to injury. However, I think the Seth Jones hate started long before this injury. And so I don't think all of it is stemming from right now. Yes, right now is not good, but everyone's been hating him long before. So I just wanted to get into that. From what I've heard and from when I've spoken to people, a lot of people's main issue with Seth Jones is his contract. For those who don't know, he was signed back in 2021 to a massive contract in terms of dollar amount and in terms of length. He was signed till the end of time. He was signed by Stan Bowman. Stan Bowman. This isn't a Kyle signing. This is one of Stan's last signings and probably his worst signing, was signing Seth Jones. But for some context of what the dynamic of the team was when Seth Jones was signed, Stan was still the GM. Jeremy Colleton was the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. You still had Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane, as well as Kirby Dach, Brandon Hagel, and Alex DeBrincat. So the team was very, very different from when Seth Jones signed to right now. Very different. A lot of people complain that, where's this guy's leadership with a contract that big? I expect you to be a great leader in the locker room. I don't at all, because when he signed, you already had one of the greatest leaders in the NHL, leading that locker room and being the main voice in that locker room. That was Jonathan Taves. He was not signed to be that voice or to be one of those main voices, because not only did you already have Johnny and Patrick Kane that were kind of the main leaders in the locker room, but you also had a lot of other veterans as well, guys that maybe weren't at the performance level as Johnny and Patty, but they had been in the NHL or at least playing professional hockey for a significant period of time. Seth Jones was not brought in to be this great leader for the Chicago Blackhawks. That expectation, I feel like, has now pivoted since Kyle Davidson took general management over from Stan Bowman, and since the burn it all to the ground rebuild began. He's kind of been made to be this leader role. I think he's more of a leader one-on-one, maybe a little bit of a veteran leader to like Alex Vlasic or other defensemen, but I don't think he was ever going to be this like great leader role in the locker room. I don't think that's him, and I think that's okay if that's not him. That wasn't the expectation when he signed, and I don't think he is that guy. I think the other main concern and the biggest issue that people have with Seth Jones is, he was supposed to be the next Duncan Keith. Okay, no one's going to be the next Duncan Keith. Even Duncan Keith's kid is not going to be the next Duncan Keith. There is one Duncan Keith in the world. There is not going to be a person that, is the next hit. No. Seth Jones is Seth Jones. Seth Jones is not Duncan Keith 2.0. So yes, I'm not happy with his performance right now, but I think there's a lot of things thrown on him that aren't necessarily his fault. Like I said, you hate the contract, but he wasn't the one that, he did not force the Chicago Blackhawks to create that contract for him. That was Stan. I'm all for hockey players getting their money. Like, you swindled a moron of a GM into a lot of money for a very long time. You have the ability to make $9.5 million after playing this shit show every game. Go for it. Go get your bag. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the performance right now, but I'm all for players getting their money. So that's all on Seth Jones. Looking to the future for the big club, because I don't want to get it too much into other negative aspects, but we do have the trade deadline coming up. We kind of went through the predictions in terms of guys that I think maybe get called up. Now we're going to talk about guys that I think maybe go away, either at the trade deadline or maybe in a trade coming up soon. I'm very much under the opinion of flip everyone. I don't care. Just don't take number 67 away from Rockford unless you're bringing him up to the big club. But flip everybody. I think the number one that we've been talking about has been Taylor Hall. There's been rumors for the past couple of months that he was either looking for a trade or, he was going to be a bigger piece. There was rumors of New Jersey very interested in him. He had an interview today where, he said that he wanted to continue playing here, but now he's not sure. He's keeping that door open. It was very vague. I think he will be flipped at the trade deadline. I can see him going one or two ways. Some guys that I think, or some teams that I think maybe could take an interest on him: New Jersey, Vancouver, Colorado, Calgary, or even Ottawa. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets scooped up from either a established playoff contender, one that's maybe in the top 3 right now in terms of playoff contention, and they're just looking for additional depth, and there's not really a ton of expectation for him in terms of performance, or maybe a team that's kind of like flirting on that bubble in terms of getting into maybe the second wild card spot, and they're looking for, just like a boost in scoring to get them into the wild card position. I can see him going either of two ways, but either way, I think Taylor Hall is gone come trade deadline. Second one is Philip Kurashev. As much as I do like him, I like him as a player. Very much am a fan of Philip Kurashev. I understand his performance has been lacking, and I do realize that, but I'm still a fan of him. I do think he's gone come trade deadline because, respectfully, KD doesn't know what to do with him. Like I said before regarding with Isaac Phillips, Phillips, Kurashev, and Reichel, management doesn't know what to do with them. They were drafted by the old guy. They came in during COVID-ish times. Their development was a little stunted with COVID, and they don't really fit in to a spot. So I don't think that they know what to do with him. I don't think Luke knew what to do with Kurashev. But see what you can get. I think right now with how he's playing and how much he's been scratched, I don't know if you can even get an opportunity to flip him at the trade deadline. But I think if you can get anything, you're better off. Because if we learned anything from the Dylan Strome fiasco of 2022, getting a draft pick is better than letting a player walk away and then they're like leading point scoring. Lucas, maybe. I think I don't think he gets flipped in the trade deadline, but I do think he gets flipped in the future. But I see him being a piece to a larger trade of maybe a certain person that Kyle has his eye on, or maybe more picks. I would like a certain person because I think we're past the point of just constantly trying to rack up draft picks. I'd like us to start getting already established veterans. Lucas, maybe. Pat Maroon, he's gone. Who knows? Maybe St. Louis is trying to sneak into the wild card and Pat Maroon wants to go home. He's gone. Totally okay with that. TJ Brody, I would trade him at the trade deadline for cash considerations. Totally cool with that. Or maybe buyout, perhaps, because, at the end of this season, we'll have $6.2 million freed up with buyouts from McCabe, Bailey, and then Anthony CU's contract ends up. So there's room if you want to buy out Brody for his last year of his contract. Connor Murphy, similar to Khrushchev in terms of he's injured right now. I don't know how much you would be able to get for him with him being injured if you're looking to flip. And because injury has always been kind of an issue for Connor Murphy, but also similar to Lucas, if you're trading away Connor Murphy, I don't see you trading him just for the sake of trying to flip him at the deadline. I think he's a piece in a purposeful trade for maybe a guy or a couple of guys, or a couple of younger guys that you're looking to get, and not just a knee-jerk flip at the trade deadline. Another one that I kind of really hope doesn't get flipped is Crevier. With the way that he's playing, he's definitely playing. He could get flipped at the trade deadline, and it would be a shock. And I do think that Kyle could get something for him. I hope not, because I like the kid. I like the way that the kid's playing. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if something comes across Kyle's desk and it looks good, and he's got to flip him. I totally get it. A couple that I don't think gets flipped at the trade deadline at all, Martinez and Smith, they're unrestricted at the end of the year. They're older. I don't think you really get anything if you're trying to flip him at the deadline. I don't know another team that would potentially be looking for those types of players. But you never know. Kaiser, again, I'm unsure. I'm not the biggest fan of his performance necessarily. I know management really likes him. I think when he's good, he's really good. And when he's not good, it's a big hole on the ice. Unsure. I think maybe they want to see how the rest of the season goes and maybe reevaluate on that. That's all that I have this week, guys. Who would have thought that I would have talked for an entire hour by myself? So yeah, make sure to hit that like and subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, however you watch or listen to us on a weekly basis. Thank you so much to our 3 people that have been listening to me gab for an hour about everything and anything, because I didn't want to talk about how bad we are right now. That is all, and we will talk at you guys next week.